I want you to see what I saw. That's the only honest way I can start this, because if I tell it as a story, you'll distance yourself like people do with bad dreams. If I show you the footage, though, you won't be able to pretend it's imaginary. The first frame is a black porch, my door, a dark rectangle. Then, at 2:13 a.m., something leans into the peephole and fills the circle with a face that shouldn't fit in the world of light bulbs and mailboxes anymore. I live alone in a narrow house that keeps its breath shallow and its secrets locked in corners. The hall smells of old coffee and the cheap detergent I always forget to change. At night, the wooden floorboards remember footsteps that aren't mine. They creak like old knuckles. I was asleep when the motion sensor on the camera woke up and sent me a recording. 3 seconds, then silence. I pressed play like you press a wound, gently, almost pleading. The image is grainy, green edges, and the faint halo of the peephole lens. At first, I thought it was a neighbor playing a prank, a face framed in the small ring, pale skin like paper, hair thin and white and plastered to the skull. But the eyes are the part that grips you and won't let go. Too dark, each one a tiny moonless night. They look through the glass instead of at it, like someone peering past me into the room where I sleep. Her mouth moves without sound for a moment, and then she leans closer until all I can see is the texture of her skin, like cracked leather tucked in the folds of an old coat. There were small things that should have let me breathe. The dress she wore, a faded slip that glinted faintly in the porch light, like someone trying to hold on to glamour they never had. The porch light itself buzzed, a thin, metallic whisper that synced with the hum of the refrigerator and the distant highway. Outside, I could hear nothing but rain beginning to tap the eaves, a soft, drowning applause. Inside, my hands were cold from the phone screen, my heartbeat a small, frantic drum. I stared at her face until the seconds blurred. The footage showed her posture shift. The shoulders hunched as if the world hurt her. The fingers curled in a way that did not belong to a living person. I noticed then a detail my brain tried to shove away, a tiny smear of something dark on the strap of her dress, like rust or old blood, and a scent almost remembered through pixels, the metallic tang of pennies and wet wool. I told myself to call the police. I told myself to look through the peephole and be brave. My hand hovered over the deadbolt, and for the first time in years, I felt that primal mistake, the urge to hide under the covers and make the house forget I lived there. I didn't go to the door. I watched the clip on a loop as the camera recorded her face as she stayed and stayed, like a thing waiting for permission to step inside. I told myself it was a one-off, an odd person with nowhere else to be. I told myself a lot of things while the recording kept looping, until the video glitched and the room tilted. That night, the house behaved like someone breathing on the back of my neck. The radiator clicked in anxious Morse, the faucet in the kitchen sighed without water, and every clock on the wall seemed to lose a second at once. I left the porch light on and sat cross-legged on the living room floor with the laptop balanced on my knees. I watched the peephole frame again and again. Each replay shifted something microscopic. A new crease in her dress, a newer smear at the hem, the way her head turned 17 degrees farther toward the left than it had before, as if listening for an answer. At 3:02 a.m., the camera recorded the dress, and behind her, on the far side of the street, a flash of movement like someone sprinting away. The timestamp blinked and then was wrong. It jumped back 37 seconds as if the footage were chewing its own tail. When I froze the frame and enlarged the grain, there was a detail I had not seen, the reflection in the peephole glass. It wasn't my hallway. It was a dim shape of a bedspread, the corner of a lamp, and, impossible, my own sleeping outline. The peephole, meant to see out, was showing the inside of my house reflected inside that tiny world. I stood up so fast the chair scraped. My phone buzzed on the table. A notification from the camera app. Motion detected at front door. I was already looking at the motion, already watching the slow, patient press of her face against the lens. The sound that rose then wasn't from the video. It came from the door itself, a soft, damp knock that sounded like knuckles on meat. 1, 2, 3. I could hear each tap in my ribs. My throat closed. I opened the app and found older clips I hadn't recorded, a month of short, empty videos labeled with times I knew I'd been awake or at work. In them, the door was never empty. Sometimes she was far, a shadow at the edges. Sometimes she was closer, but in every clip, the camera tilted as if to look behind her. In one, the peephole showed the skeleton of my hallway, hung with coats I no longer owned. In another, she turned her head, and for a breathless second, the lens caught the inside of my kitchen, a plate on the counter I'd left that afternoon. I called the police. They came the next day and walked my porch with polite shoes, kicked at nothing, checked the locks. They said there was nothing there to charge, no prints worth noting. Probably kids, one of them offered, smiling like a man who believed the world made sense. After they left, I scrubbed the door with bleach and boiled water, as if cleanliness could erase an intruder who fit in nightmares. The smell of bleach mixed with that metallic scent, and I gagged on it. The air in my mouth tasted like pennies and old pennies and worse things. That night, the knocking began at 2:13 a.m. on the dot. I watched the camera as my own hand, visible in the video, reached for the deadbolt from the inside, and then fell away. I told myself one more play, one more loop, and then I would stop. You don't think clearly when your life has become a highlight reel of someone else's patience. At 2:13 a.m., the knock started again, and the app froze on her face for a long, indecent minute. Then the feed changed without warning. The peephole glass filled with the dim, familiar geometry of my bedroom, the lamp with the frayed shade, the poster crooked above the bed, the rumpled corner of the blanket I always kicked off. For a breath, I believed it was a reflection trick, the camera catching a reflection it shouldn't, but the outline in the bed was unmistakable. It was me, sleeping on my side, one arm thrown out over the cover as I always slept. Only I wasn't in that bed. I ran. The hallway smelled of bleach and something else now, something sweet and metallic that hung like a promise. My hands shook as I threw the bedroom door open. There I was, or rather someone who wore my face like an old mask, curled under the blanket, chest rising in the slow, regular rhythm of sleep. Closer, the skin had the paper-thin translucence I'd watched in the peephole close-ups, veins like faded maps. When I stepped closer, the blanket stirred and the person in the bed turned. Eyes opened too quick for awaking and fixed on me with that same moonless look. The air between us dropped in temperature until my teeth hurt. "Hey," I said absurdly, as if words could bargain. The voice that answered wasn't mine. It was my voice after a bad night, when something had swallowed the warmth. The mouth moved without sound for a beat, and then it shaped a grin that was all patience and accusation. My hand reached for the bed rail, and when it moved, the skin slid like old leather over bone. I wanted to touch it to prove it was real, to anchor this nightmare back to flesh. My fingers met a hand colder than ice, and for a second they passed through like mist through glass. My nerves screamed and the world went thick. From the front door came a soft, wet sound, the latch turning from the outside. Not in the house, outside. I ran to the door with the speed of someone who has nothing left to lose and slammed my shoulder into it. It held. The deadbolt was still in place. On the other side, footsteps shuffled back as if someone had been waiting to be invited in and then been refused. A voice, not human, not holy, breathed against the wood and made the peephole fog with its heat. My phone buzzed. A new video file arrived in the app, Front Door Live 0215. I opened it with fingers that had stopped belonging to me. The clip showed the peephole from the outside. For a second, I didn't understand what I was seeing. Then my stomach collapsed. In the round glass, pressed against the lens, was my own face. Older, hungry, with that same cracked skin and the motionless smile. Its eyes were, impossibly, the eyes I had been watching all night. It tapped the glass 3 times, slow and precise. I watched, and on the screen, my sleeping self in the bed turned its head. It smiled the way only something that had waited a very long time can smile. I should have run. I should have left the house and never come back. But when I looked down at the phone, hands trembling, The feed from the bedroom showed someone pushing aside the blanket, and there, in the corner of the frame where the lamp's light faltered, I saw my hand reach out to the doorway. The door opened. I knocked from the outside.
Subscribe to Horror Story Bar.